Hello, and welcome to the Woo is True podcast. I am your host, Dr. Nicole Garitano. I like to refer to myself as a recovering academic and healthcare provider, and I now help other people develop their intuition and really come to terms with this idea of science and spirituality. I am a lover of both evidence and divine coincidence. So let's see if you're in the right place. Are you someone who's ever wondered how spirituality and science fit together? Maybe you've questioned what you learned through traditional religion, or you've had experiences that you know have a deeper meaning and you just aren't sure how to figure those out. If so, the Woo is True is for you. In this podcast, I want to make the practical mystical and the mystical practical, because I know there's a way to balance the two and learn from both. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. Both practical and spiritual, both science and energy, both concrete and ethereal. So let's swap or for and dive into the woo. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode. Today, I am joined by Tequila Cousar. She is a personal brand coach and strategist, as well as a power coach and a keynote speaker. And Tequila and I are going to go deep today. We have a really raw, unedited conversation prepared here for you. I didn't do much editing to this episode because it felt so important that you just were able to hear our dialogue back and forth. And Tequila really puts it best inside the podcast, where she actually says, we took our mess and we turned it into a message. And so we really hope it helps and serves those who listen today. Okay, so the first thing I'll say is that this is like perfect timing that you chose today, like for us to do this, because I just got back Sunday from the trip. So I got to go visit all the things. I got to go do all the things. You know what I mean? I had my little group that signed up to like go on the trip with me. And so it's like things couldn't work out better, right? Like God has a plan all the time. So I feel like we should start with, because this is some of what we talked about off to the side, but I feel like one of the good things to like start with, especially like to catch the snippets of it, is like just when you read my initial email, what was going through your mind and body. Do you know what I mean? To like really have like to understand on a deep level, like what was occurring within you.
Oh my goodness. So I opened the email. Like I love reading the emails. Like I read them and I'm so in tune with them. And it got to the color orange because it was in that email. You said, "Oh, pay attention to the color orange." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, let me do that." Right. Because I know that we both are intuitive
Yeah.
entrepreneurs or just people
Hmm.
all the way around. And then I got to like that small section and you stated that you were going to go and see like witchcraft. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't follow her." Right? It was a very reactive
Uh-huh.
trigger for me, and I just started like deleting everywhere. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, she's a witch." Right? I can't that was just my response to it, and I
Hmm.
just know where it stems from. So, we will talk about that.
Yes, yes, yes. And so I love like, well, first of all, I'm really glad like you're in tune with the emails, you know what I mean? And that the other
Yes.
messages coming through like really mean something to you. You know what I mean, at the end of the day. So yeah, it was funny because I know even when we started talking, about this, right away I was like, well, wait a minute, like it's only a few sentences. I had to go back and read my own email, to be honest, because I'm like, well, if it triggered one person, maybe it triggered multiple people. And to really be like trauma informed and really in tune, right, with meeting your audience where they're at, we're looking at it like through this business lens. I was like, well, wait, I need to go back and see how I worded that, because maybe I worded it, you know what I mean, in a way. And I went back and it was like really small. And I'm like, well, I didn't call myself a witch. I don't identify as a witch. But I did have the word witch in there because part of Salem is the history of the Salem witch trials. And so I guess to back up, so people that are tuning in, they'll hear some of this because I'll do like an interlude, you know what I mean, or an intro to it. So Tequila gets my email. I don't know that she's gotten it necessarily because it just goes out to my email list, like all of us in this space. Our emails go out, and the only way you're going to know who opened it is if you go in and actually check your stats, right, on your emails. So I send it out the next morning. I wake up and I'm drinking my coffee and I'm going through my phone and I see this email that says I unfollowed a witch, and I'm like, "Ooh, this is interesting! Like, this is so fascinating." So I click it, I open it, I'm reading it. I'm not even connecting that it's me yet. I'm like, who would declare themselves a witch in an email? Who does she know that would do that? And then I get to the bottom where she's like, I unfollowed her. I've done this. Watch your back. And I'm like, wait a minute. I did say I'm going to Salem and I talked about the witch
Mm.
trials. So I hurried up and went into my back end. And she was the only person who had unsubscribed from the email. So I was like, oh, I think I'm the witch. So
Mm.
this is where it gets interesting, right? Because to anybody else out there, like listening to this or hearing us chat about it, my first reaction, my very human reaction could have been, all right, well, she doesn't like what I put out there. She thinks I'm something that I'm not. I get, I could have just been like inside really upset about it and just like festered on it, and gone about my business. And we probably would have never talked again because she thought I was a witch and I thought she was judging me on some level. And we just would have like gone our separate ways. But like as an hour went by, I was really like feeling inside. I went and like sat and did my prayer and meditation. And I just felt like, I know her on a different level than this. Like she even put in her email, she thought she knew me really well. And so I was like, I just have to send her a message. Now, at that point, I don't know. I already read she's unfollowed me, she's blocked me. So I don't know if this message is ever going to get to her. And I still knew I was on her email list because I didn't unsubscribe from her email list. So I'm like, at the very, very worst case, if she doesn't get this like through the way I'm going to send it, then I'll end up emailing it to her. I'll just copy and paste it and email it to her. And so, really, in me choosing that decision opened up like a really good dialogue. And that's really the impetus for us getting together today. Because in the course of us talking, we realized women don't do this. Women do get triggered or insulted or offended by other women, right? Or other people. But in this case, we'll just use the example of other women. And instead of like reaching out to the person, usually our instinct is, because this is a social media driven world, because this is an email driven world, it's like, oh, I have a message now, I'm going to block them, they're not good for me, and then I'm going to take my message and she'll have her message. And we end up walking away in this mindset of it's like me against her, it's us
Mhm.
against them. And we're already seeing this like across our society right now, right? Across the world. There's so many ways this is mirrored to us and reflected to us on the daily, that we're two individuals that actually chose something different in this situation. And not everybody would have done that. And that is really where the juiciness of this conversation is going to go. Why we don't do it, why we should do it, maybe some of the triggers that are holding other women back from having these open conversations and sharing more about their beliefs and where they come from. And this is just like, when you think about it, what happened between us is like one little small snippet, right? It's one little tiny ecosystem. But when we look at the bigger picture, this is happening at the macro level all across the world right now. So, as
Wow.
I say that, I just want to hand it over to you to let you tell me like just what's coming up for you as I say that, what
Mhm.
what do you want to reflect back in all of that, because I know you'll have lots of, I mean, she's a shot of tequila. This will only be audio, but she does have her shot of tequila behind her. That's her tagline, her slogan. So I know she'll have some major truth to drop on us around this as well.
Yes, and I thank you so much because I was wondering, how does she know? Like when I opened up my messenger and I saw your name, I said, she knows. She knows that it was her.
Yeah.
How does she know? But I had to really reflect back into, right, divinity. We know, right? We're in line. When we know who we are, we know when something isn't right. So
Yeah.
I thought I was like, I'm going to open this, right? I'm going to open this message, but tequila is all about how you respond. It's not your reaction, it's how you respond. Don't take it personal because sometimes
Yeah.
that's my personality. I take things personal, but I wanted to look at the bigger picture, right? What brought me to that point? Why would I say I am followed a witch, right? And I have to tell this story because this is the
Yeah.
backstory. Over 6 years ago, I became online friends with someone, and she was in Canada. I won't say her name, okay?
Mhm.
I don't know if she listens to your podcast, but she was in Canada, and we were really close friends online. Like we grew a bond. We were in the same network marketing company, and our network marketing company happened to like be going to Utah, right? So we were like, yeah, let's get a hotel, do all of these things. We got a hotel together, and, she wasn't in the room when I got there. But the unusual thing is, I saw this glow literally in the
Yeah.
closet. And I'm like, what is this? There were
Yeah.
crystals, right? It was
Mhm.
creepy to me. Now,
Yeah.
I just believe in scripture, right? When I
Yeah.
read things and I felt that was a form of sorcery, I was like, so how am I going to sleep tonight? How am I going to lay my head down? But we had this really good connection. We were there, we were connecting. And like, it was like we were only there for a couple nights. The last night I woke up and I was in this excruciating pain in my arm, like
Mm.
so bad that I was like, did I sleep on my arm wrong? I was like, no, I'm not sleeping on the arm.
Yeah.
Like this was I can't even make this up. So to this day, I still deal with that pain in my
Mm.
arm.
Mhm.
So the story that led to me really saying it's over is that she really talked about being this person from another world. And she was going
Mhm.
into these things that I was like, that's not who I am.
Right.
So I told her, hey, I don't think I can be your friend anymore. I feel we're weird about this relationship. And she went off on a tantrum. She not only blocked me, but she blocked the other lady that was in our circle. And I was hurt because I invested so much time. We were meeting every week for accountability. We were on the phone all the time. We were texting. We were doing all of these things for some years. And
Mhm.
for it to just really end so abruptly and so messy and so confusing, I was
Yeah.
hurt. So seeing who she is now, I see all of why I had to disconnect myself because she is in that world, right?
Yeah.
Of witchcraft and all of those things. So it took me about a year, Nicole, to really heal from this relationship.
Mhm.
I cried so long. I mean, we built real relationships on these
Yeah.
computers. Like
Oh,
people don't
yeah.
understand we do. Built really things,
Mhm.
and that know, like, and trust is deeper than that when you have a friend. So it took me a while, but with that awareness, I said I am going to really be alert and aware anytime I see that someone is connected to any type of sorcery that I don't believe in, I'm not going to be part of it. So that's that's what happened. And I think when
Yeah.
you had it in the email and it just said witchcraft, I was done. I was like, I can't do it, right? It's a trigger. It's a trauma in my heart right
Yeah.
now. So I'm still trying to heal from that, but I'm still being mindful who I connect myself to because
Right.
it could be, yeah, we know the world
Yeah.
out there is not fair, right? There are people who are really entrepreneurs and they're female or male, and they are they believe in these different things. And
Right.
I don't know if I'm under a covering of them, listening to their 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 podcasts or looking at their videos, absorbing their content, what am I absorbing into my soul? So we
Yeah.
gotta be mindful and filter out those things. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No.
the backstory.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree, like, we need to be in alignment, right, with what we're consuming so that it doesn't take us to a place that we don't wanna go, and, it's interesting because, like, I honor you and recognize you so much in this trauma, and even we were having our conversation back and forth, it was like I
Mhm.
just knew intuitively, like, this isn't really about me. Like, there's something bigger that's happened
Mhm.
because um, it didn't even say witchcraft. It said Salem witch trials. It was the name of the trials. I didn't even use witchcraft in my email. But, well, I should say, and it's so important to point that out because this has helped me, number one, like grow an awareness of, okay, how am I putting together emails? How am I wording things so that maybe it's not triggering to people? And then I think number two, like for you, for what you're reflecting back, you've grown in like your awareness, like that word is triggering. Like even just seeing the word come up, it brings this flood of emotion and feeling because of the connection that you had, you know what I mean, with this individual. And so things aren't just black and white, people. You know what I mean? It is every word we write, everything we say, the way we're communicating. Oh, it's just so important. Like it carries so much power, even beyond what we can really cognitively contain in our brain, because there's that whole level of what do people feel when they read this? What does it
Mm.
bring up for them? What happens in their body and their soul, right? Like in their spirit. The way we're communicating within our business, with our clients, even with our loved ones, you know?
Mm.
And I appreciate too what you said around, like you want to have that protection, like you want to align with
Mhm.
people and you don't want the negative, like maybe that negative essence to seep in. And I want to keep this balance because I also know if there are people that do identify with some of this or they've studied it, they're going to have opposite feelings potentially to what we're talking
Mm.
about today. And so there's always two sides, right, to every story. And that's really what
Yeah.
we're trying to reflect here, that we each had a side to our story and we talked it through. And so I feel like keeping the dialogue open in some sense to understand people better and what they
Mm.
believe is so important right now, especially in our world. So one of the things I just do regularly, because I do intuitive work, because I am tapping into other people's energy,
Mm.
around me, is I do a lot of like putting up my energetic protection around me. And like, since God is my source,
Yes.
that's who I pray to every day. That's who I ask for protection. And before I do a session with someone, I'm like, okay, God, Holy Spirit, I want you here protecting me. Please use me as a conduit, for the work that you want to do today. Let me speak to this client. Let me reveal to them what you want revealed. Now, that's a very personal thing that I do. I don't get on
Mm.
the call then and do that with my clients, but that's for me. And then I'm expecting they're going to ground in for themselves in the way that they identify with that feels best to them. And like having been someone raised in the church, you know what I mean? Like very involved in some of my different churches that we've gone to. I totally also understand what it means to identify with the scripture, you know what I mean? And the scripture only. And so honoring that's really important to me. And I really feel like, this is just my opinion, but this is what I have found to be true in doing this work with other people, is that God wants to speak to us in whatever way we're open to receiving the message. And if he
Mm.
and he did truly create everything, right? And if you're out there saying, and if he did, because you're still someone that's like struggling with that and you're
Mhm.
listening to this, I'm going to say he created everything, which means he had a hand in
Mm.
creating all these ways that people try to find connection and try to find answers and try to find that greater meaning. And so that's the lens I've kind of shifted to just in the work that I'm doing, so that I can find like a bridge, to reach everybody that
Mm.
needs this kind of love and support and just being seen, right? And being heard like we're doing right
Mm.
now. So like, how do you find yourself on that journey, or how does that resonate?
Oh, totally. It totally resonates with me because that's
Yeah.
my line of work too, right? I
Right.
have to connect with people at a feeling level and understand who they are. So, however they bring in that channeling, I guess, that's theirs. And I do the same as you do for mine, right? I pray
Mm-hmm.
about things. Before I got on this, I was just like, Lord, please just let me be the vessel you work through, right?
Right.
And be the message for other people who may be in that situation, and understand that, yes, there are more than one ways to connect to the source. And we all have our beliefs, our convictions,
Right.
right? What we
Mm-hmm.
stand for, what we stand
Yes.
against. And we should not, deviate from that for no one. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to change who a person is, but this is definitely an awareness of who you may be, how you may think, right? You personally may think about other people. Right. And it's teaching me, I've learned so much. Like through that time you and I were communicating, I learned so much. I learned, I can't jump to judgment in
Mm-hmm.
that fashion. We can't jump to judgment and just think that someone is who they are without really getting that information. And you even expressed that in that message.
Yeah.
Like, I
Mm-hmm.
really felt that we should talk about this before we jump to an conclusion. You are right, right? You're certainly right. We should have had a conversation. And I'm glad we had this conversation and the one prior to it, because I've been enlightened so much. Right, it's
Oh,
who we are. As we evolve, we learn. And it's not that we know everything, because if we say I know what I know everything,
right.
we're stopping ourselves from truly being a vessel. Like, we stop our channeling in which we do
Mhm.
to God. So being in that open vessel, being open to this interview, all of that is because someone needs to be healed, right? Someone on this other
Right.
side, and or this healed me. So I do appreciate the opportunity for you allowing me to tell that story, which I've never shared that story at all. It was
Mm,
something that I just kept by myself and to myself. But now I see why. I see
right.
why. You're right. It's this perfect platform to express that story. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and
So
there's so much transformation on being able to give words to what you're feeling in your body,
mm,
even if it's been a while. You know what I mean? You're still carrying like that sadness, like almost like you're still grieving that friendship on some level because of the deep connection. You know what I mean?
mhm,
That you felt. So even being able to give it a voice here today takes you to that
mhm.
next level of healing,
Yes.
through that process. And like the judgment piece, we are human. Like we all go through everyday judging. I think, like you said, I agree. It's like becoming aware of when we're doing it because we're doing it at the micro level. Like, how many times are you at
Mhm.
a checkout at a grocery store and you're looking at the people around you and it's taking too long and you're like, oh, can't they get their wallet out? I mean, in your own head,
Yeah.
right? We're just judging,
Mm,
judging, judging, judging. Oh, why are they driving that car? Why would she wear that? I mean, right? Like all these little things
mhm.
that we're very programmed. That's very much the humanness of us, living like we're spiritual beings living in these human bodies. And so these are like so many of the things that we really are here to learn and master. I feel like, while we're allowed to be here, granted this life, here on this planet. And so um even like when we can see it on a bigger level, like we're talking about, it starts to help us become more aware, like where are we doing that just
Mm.
everywhere, you know what I
Yeah.
mean, throughout the
Yeah.
day. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that like to trip people up, like, oh my gosh, I do that all the time. Now I feel so guilty and so terrible, because it's not about holding on to the guilt or the shame either.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it's really about, can you recognize it? Because usually when
Mhm.
we're judging something, we're judging the same thing in ourselves. It's something we have unresolved within ourselves. And so this is like the perfect example of that. That word comes up, it hits a trigger, it's unresolved on some level, maybe because you haven't been able to give it voice yet, you know?
Mhm.
And so then that judgment comes in. Now we've shown like how you can actually go backwards, like rewind time a little bit, and get to the root of it and talk it through. But so many people don't get the opportunity to do that. And so I don't want to start a cycle of guilt or shame for people. I really
Mhm.
feel like it's about recognizing it, seeing like where does that reflect back to me, and then like really forgiving yourself for the judgment once it's happened.
Mhm.
Like, I forgive myself for judging myself or for judging others for da 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 da, and just releasing it, because you don't
Yeah.
want to be on that perpetual hamster wheel of judgment, guilt, shame, judgment, guilt, shame, judgment, guilt,
Uh,
shame. That doesn't get
yeah.
us anywhere either.
At all, it will just spiral out. And with even us having our conversation, I said, look, we are going to still be connected, right? I'm not going to
Yeah,
see you in public and ignore you or
right,
act, weird around you just because
right,
of that. But think of it goes back to what you said at the head of this. Like, if we would not have addressed it, how awkward would we be if we would seen each other in? I don't want that feeling. I never
right.
want that feeling with people. So for us to really like what do you say? You chop the root down at the core,
Right.
and think of how we can actually spin this into something that could be actually helpful and healing to other people was genius. Was a genius idea because it's something that people probably never talk about, or won't talk about because they feel as if, right, guilt, shame, and all of those convictions around it,
Mm,
and or they are practitioners of it, you right? And it's something
right.
secretive. No one really needs to talk about these things, but I'm glad we were able to really talk about it, talk it out, and get to the really the heart of it. And it's awareness, like
Yes.
big time. Awareness helps you to grow and develop into the person that you are desiring to become. Awareness helps you develop better relationships with not only yourself, but with people, right?
Right.
It's all about awareness. And the more you can become aware on that, like you said, micro level, the macro will be so different as well. So,
Yes.
yeah, this was
Yeah, I
amazing.
agree. And even as you were saying that, it made me think about, especially with women, you know,
Mm,
if you don't get to the root of it, if you don't have these conversations, well, then what happens? Like we all have our support groups. So then we go out to our extensions and say, oh my gosh, did you read this? Or, oh my gosh, she said this about me. And then we create a negative ripple effect around each other, where then we're like fueling a fire, right? I mean, I think
a
that's just
smear
age old
campaign.
women, right?
Yeah, it creates that smear campaign and it could really hurt
Right.
that person's reputation, right?
Yes.
I was not going anywhere and say, even though I did put it in my email, I did not use a name. I just
Right.
said, hey,
Right.
this is what I did because I don't believe in smearing anyone,
Yeah.
right? Oh my gosh, that could definitely hurt reputations. We see what happens to celebrities when
Right.
things happen, their personal brand is smeared for a very long time. So that never should be your intentions when you bump into a situation as such or something different, right? It's just be quiet about your things and your approach and step away from it and or address it with the person as we discussed before. But we should
Right.
never go to our girlfriend groups and start talking about the that's gossip, and that
Right.
could tarnish a person's reputation big time.
Yes.
So,
And I'm
good
thinking about
point.
like the natural tendencies, right? Of what happens when you don't talk to the person, because again, that's such the human side of us. Like, the
Mhm.
judgment, right? Now I'm going to go talk about it with
Oh,
somebody instead of the person I should be talking about it with. And so we start those cycles that also end up being really unhealthy for ourselves, like you said, for that smear effect. But also, when we go out to our groups, and I don't think we always think about this because we're like, oh, this is my support group. Like, these are my girls. These are the people I go talk to because they're going to make me feel better, right, about this. But inadvertently, because our energy is all mixing with each other, the way we're feeling the negativity, the hurt, we're actually projecting it then into that group. And they're
mhm.
walking away with snippets of that then they're taking into their lives and businesses. And so that's really a harmful ripple effect,
Oh,
um,
God.
at the
Yeah.
end of the day,
Oh
you
my
know,
God.
you know,
That is
because,
that could be painful,
yeah,
right? Because what if someone would not know you as the person, right? But you're getting all of these
right,
stories and you're making all of these judgments about that person. So when you actually do meet them, you know them from what the person told you. We've all probably experienced these things in our experiences in life, how someone can talk about us before we're in the room. And so when you get in that room, it's like, ooh, this is who she is. And that could, again, that could hurt us.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
But you're right,
yeah.
you can totally sense the energy of it. So when you walk into a room and people have been raving about you before you walk in, it feels like the best room, right, to walk into. And when you walk
Mhm.
into the room where everybody was just like, "Shh, shh, shh, shh," she did
Oh,
a
yeah.
whisper, whisper. It doesn't feel right. Something feels off as soon as you walk in. So yeah, again, like that's the way we're reading people's energy sometimes and receiving information. Um, so I feel like we're hitting on so many good things that sometimes come naturally to women and our very humanness, the judgment, maybe the bit of talking, and gossip. But, at the root of all that, I feel is that women just really want to be loved and supported. And
Mhm.
sometimes we want that, like we want nothing more than be loved and supported by the other women in our
Mhm.
lives and our circles. And sometimes those can be the most challenging ones to win over because
Yeah.
of what we just talked about, because of the preconceived notions and judgment and that tendency to like talk, right, amongst other people. And
Yeah.
so, I feel like for people listening, it's about kind of helping them understand how to get to that place where they can be the supporter, right,
Mhm.
for other women. Because while we all long for it, we can't really receive it unless we're giving it,
True.
right?
True.
Need to be giving it out to actually receive it back. So I
Mm.
feel like maybe we could give like our top takeaways from what we learned through our experience,
Mhm.
um, as like the guiding light, so to speak, or like the pillars that people could attempt to implement, right? Attempt to follow. Because I know with what you do and with what I do, we like people to walk away with like, here are some actionable, even mini
Yeah.
action steps that you can take, so you don't fall into this trap or this works better for you. So I think especially women out there listening that are like, oh my gosh, I do find myself in judgment. Oh yeah, I do have like my friend that I probably text and share all the things with, or I have my group. How often am I sharing positive things versus negative? And then there are women listening to this, they're like, man, I just want to be able to trust the group of women that are around me and I want to feel really supported. So what do you feel like would be some of like your key things? And this is off the cuff, everyone. We're
Oh
just
my
throwing out
goodness.
um
So
the
true.
main ideas.
Oh my goodness. Seek to understand yourself before you seek to be understood, right?
Mm,
If we understand who we are, then when a situation pops up, you don't want to be convicting or connecting with people in a way where it's this is my point of view, right? You don't want to be stuck in that because if we are, then that creates so much tunnel and lack of growth or development in yourself. So that is my number one thing. Seek to understand yourself before you seek to be before you're understood. But also, it's don't fall into judgment, right?
mhm,
We all have our own beliefs, our own natural strengths, right? Those are things that we can't change about a person. So falling into judgment, again, it's the understanding part, understanding
mhm.
someone before you start disconnecting and thinking they are someone that they are not. And we understand everyone wants to be seen, heard, understood, all of those things. And there are ways to do that. So, connecting and being connected to the right community, not only being connected to the right community, but communicating that with other people are going to, it's really going to hold the door open for opportunities and space for you for healing,
Yeah.
for, your next level of healing because I can't say that I'm totally healed from
Right.
it, but I think that this conversation really kind of sealed the door for me, right? Oh,
Mhm.
I'm healed. Now I know how to approach someone. Now I know not to judge someone. So this was like a session for me.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, even as you were saying that, I'm thinking like in my head, like, okay, judgment hack. So we know people are gonna still judge, right? We're gonna all fall into that. So what if like when you catch yourself judging and as in the same instant you try to think of something positive about the person or the situation. So even if it is in the grocery line, right? And you're like, oh, this person is so slow in front of me. And you're like, oh, that's kind of judgy, right? Like I don't know what their day's been like. Hey, at least I'm the next person in line, right? Like I'm going to be out of here soon enough. But I feel like just switching the dialogue in our own minds, because that's where a lot of this is happening. If you are a business owner, then yes, we have the leverage to go out there and talk, and share it. But I think for so many women that could potentially be listening to this, a lot of it's going on very internally with not a lot of expression other than maybe the judging and like the judging in the head and the gossiping to the friends because they're so frustrated and they need to vent right about it. So I feel like the judgment hack, because you don't want to fall into that circle, which I love that advice, felt really important to share. I feel like for me too, it is about, so this is a little thing I've been doing recently, and it really came through when I was on the trip, is when somebody triggers me, whether it's my husband, whether it's somebody else in my family, it doesn't always have to be like in these work dynamics or relationships, outside, even in our own home, this can come up. But what would it be like just to picture that person when they were a little child? Just
Mm,
like the innocent little child that they were so long ago when they were
mhm,
naive, when we were naive and life was grand for the most part. And we just kind of went through our days. Um, Sometimes that really helps me with the triggering because I'm like, well, deep down, they're just like somebody that wants to be seen, heard, understood, supported, loved at the end of the day. And like they're acting out right now, or what I don't like, what they're saying, I may not like. So,
mhm,
wait, is there something in me that needs to change because I don't like it? Is it a reflection to me? And if I can't identify that, well, can they just be this little child, in my
mhm,
mind? Because so much easier, right, to offer love, support,
mhm,
compassion, forgiveness to a little child than sometimes it is for us to offer that to other adults in our lives.
mhm, and that's totally free. Nicole,
Yeah.
it love doesn't have a price to it. Compassion doesn't, right? Our
Yeah.
ear, our heart, it doesn't have a price to it. So when you're able to lean into that alone, that's priceless. That is going to help that person understand their self, you, and they're going to have that outlet to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that is the root of it all. Like everybody wants to be seen by their coworker, manager, business besties, whomever. So when we're able to do those free things for them, that is priceless at the heart of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So I feel like we're landing on some good advice around you don't want to fall into the cycle of judgment, but when you find yourself falling into it, these are some steps that we've given you. We just said, like Tequila just said perfectly, all those things we just mentioned, they're free. They don't cost anything, right? Except maybe your time, your effort to reach out and talk to someone, or the time it takes you to actually switch your point of view. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
Like reframe. So again, we're back to that awareness, right? We don't want to fall into the cycle of judgment. So how do we become more aware? And then how do we reframe right in the moment is what we're
mhm,
trying to do. And then
mhm,
once you've had the reframe, what does it feel like to reach out to the person, right? Because you have to ultimately have the communication that Tequila was talking about. And so, like for me, that was okay, I'm just going to send her a message,
mhm,
right? I don't know if she'll get it, but I'm just going to send her a message. For somebody else, it might be I need to pick up the phone and call the person. For somebody
mhm,
else, it might be I need to wait 24 hours. Like I'm feeling very upset. Part of it is you have to get yourself to a calmer state. Like, luckily for me, I came in, did some prayer and meditation. I'm really in tune with doing some of this other work. So I could bring myself down a few notches, probably more quickly than maybe the average person as they're connecting the dots. Like, is this about me? I really think this is about me. Um, so, everybody's going to be different. So it's not to say like what we're talking about today, if somebody's already coming to mind for you that, man, I need to make this right, or I need to take the first step. We're not
mhm,
saying go out there guns a blazing if you're still really upset and really hurt.
mhm,
What do you need to do to come down to a level where you can talk to them. And so that may even mean maybe you get your journal out and you just write them a letter, right?
Mhm.
Getting
I
all the
thought
things
about
out.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Dumping it
And you
all.
know what? Because you bring me, oh my goodness, you bring me to a point where this world is full of egotistic mindsets, right? It's all about removing that ego. Once
Mhm.
you remove the ego, you allow love to you allow love to really flow into your life.
Yeah.
And then that love is going to allow you to say, you know what? Let me write that letter. Let me send that email. Let me send that text or, that message,
Yeah.
those things that, or pick up that phone. So doing that practice allow you to be more balanced. And like we said, people have their own practices, but maybe everyone needs to do that before they're going to address that big elephant
Right.
in the right. So,
Yeah.
however you release and attach, do that and then address the elephant.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. So whether it's journaling, maybe you're somebody that likes to do voice memos and you need to listen to yourself back and you're like, "Oh, that did sound really harsh. I probably don't want to say that."
Yeah.
Or it feels really good to hear it harsh. You wouldn't say it, but it feels like validating to you because that's still the human side of us to process through some of the emotion is to feel validated, and seen and heard. And so that's a trick. Like you can see and hear yourself. If you need the
Mhm.
validation in the moment, record yourself saying all the things and then listen to yourself back. And you can have like immediate gratification that we also crave in our world, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
But I have to say, like, have the conversation.
Mhm.
Have the conversation because
Yeah.
there's so much expansiveness on the other side of these conversations. And
Mhm.
I know even when we went back and forth just in we're messaging each other, um, the rest of my day went so well. Like I felt like a weight had been lifted. I felt like things were resolved. I went about
Yes.
like this was on 4th of July. So I had sent it out on July 3rd. I'm seeing all this the morning of the 4th. We had things to do that day with friends. I was like, oh, am I going to be able to go enjoy myself? Like, but actually,
Mhm.
once we had the discussion, I was like, oh, I can't go enjoy myself. And we're going to do a podcast and talk about it. And this feels really amazing instead of the
Mhm.
way it had felt, you know what I mean, in the morning. Like it shifted that quickly, just in a matter
Yeah.
of hours, right?
Mhm.
And it probably shifted for you in some way too, in a matter
Absolutely.
of hours.
Mhm. Yeah. And just believe I didn't feel good doing it. And the emotion behind it, I was so torn, but I'm like,
Mhm.
I have to do what I have to do to protect myself. But that conversation really helped us turn that mess into a message, right?
Right.
We're here. Like, it
Yes.
really does help, So, yeah, having that conversation is important. Don't sweep it under the rug because at one point or another it's going to come out and it may not be with that person. Somebody might be the innocent victim that broke the straw, right? That broke the
Mhm.
back, and you don't want it to be that way because that can hurt a relationship that you just didn't mean to hurt, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Great advice. So I feel like we're landing on for everybody judgment, right? How you come out of the judgment cycle, what the hack's going to look like for you, how you grow in your awareness, right? Growing in that awareness each day, um, dumping out the emotions, the feelings that you need to dump out and get them out on paper or with your voice, and then ultimately reaching out to that person that you need to have the conversation with. Now, the thing that could happen that we probably don't want to miss out on kind of discussing as well is what if that person isn't open to having the conversation? In this case, I was fortunate because Tequila, you responded to me. Now, sending it, I didn't know. I was kind of
Mhm.
like I said in the beginning, I'll find a way to get this to her, and maybe she won't answer this. And I was like going in checking pretty regular, like, has she read it? Is she, like, oh, so I was just
Yeah.
wondering, like, how blocked I really was. um, you know what I mean? So there is always that instance of what if the person doesn't reach out. So then what is your next best avenue? Um, and so we're sharing from a place of we connected. I think we can probably each share maybe a word of advice or some tidbits on what we would do if we tried to reach out to someone and they didn't respond. So do you have anything like right off that you want to
Goodness.
share?
Well, one of the agreements, 4 agreements is don't take it personal. I love that book,
Yes, me
right?
too.
That is the shot, right? Don't take it personal. You know who you are. A person made a judgment based off what they thought, right? Because again, it was fascination. We made it up in our head without actually speaking to the source. So if that person doesn't want to connect with you, know that it's not you, it's them, and they're minimizing their openness to really come to an agreement to something. And you can't be stuck in that place of, "Oh my goodness, they think I am this person." Show them different, prove them wrong. Let your post that you put out there prove who you are or in whose you are, right? Go out there and show them different. And if they never come back, let them go because there's a period in your life where you have to disconnect from everything that was meant to hurt you in order to move towards those things that are meant to heal you. So letting that person go and just really there I had to sit and let her go in a meditation. I had to
Yeah.
imagine me departing my soul from her, and it got so much better and so much good started to happen in my life once I was able to release that. So letting go of that person is the best recipe. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I love that. And for me, I would say my advice to everyone would simply be when the time is right, you'll have the conversation. So, knowing that you know what you need to say, you know it in your heart. I always feel like just asking God, source, whatever, however you connect and tap in. For me, that would be like just saying, God, when the time's right, the person will be there and we'll have the conversation that we're meant to have. And then just holding that loosely, like no expectation of timing. You'll be surprised when you do that, how quickly it actually comes to fruition and is like right in front of you. And that you can use this with other things, but particularly with this, as much as you can release it, knowing that you will connect, like you will have the conversation when and if you're meant to have the conversation. But holding that space and like really just asking for that guidance. God will know when it's the right time for you to have the conversation. And if now is not the right time, you'll be led to when the right time is for that conversation. So
Yeah.
I feel that
True.
a lot. And that goes for
Mhm.
a lot of things in life when they're
Yeah.
not happening exactly the way we want them to happen. Um, the other like interesting tie into this that I just want to make sure we capture is I did go to Salem. I just got back from Salem. We did a lot of the historical tours, and I'd read a lot of books around the history and the actual witch trials themselves. And what's so interesting, number one, the word witch, if you go way, way back to its original meaning, actually meant like a wise one. They really weren't evil. What happened is over time, books were written, the character, right? Like this archetype character came to be. Now, when we get specific to the Salem witch trials themselves, everyone that was killed was innocent.
Mm.
They really weren't practicing witchcraft necessarily. A lot of it was tied into the religious beliefs of the time because of the Puritans and the fact that the pastor's daughter and her cousin, who was his niece that was living with him, they were playing fortune telling games and they were afraid they were going to be caught. So, really, the accusers were all girls that were like between the ages of 10 and 13 that were accusing these women and men in town. And some of them were very prominent people in town, like the wealthy, the people that could buy their bench in the church so their family could sit in it every week. Some of them were like destitute, living in the streets. but had other issues with some of the families. So it was extremely fascinating because so many people were falsely accused, lives were lost. And it all came down to like what this person was saying versus what this person was saying. And so there are like some undertones that really match what we were talking about today, right? If one person's saying this and one person's saying that, but they never come together to get to the root of what's going on, then in worst case scenarios, things like that happen, right? Where people are falsely accused, lives are lost. And actually, for Salem, it's a tiny little bit of their history. We learned a lot about the colonization. There's so much around the Native Americans and their land being taken away when they came in, like so many other heartbreaking things that actually happened in Salem itself or before it was Salem, before they named it, right down to like the little bit about the witch trials. But even as I was there, just feeling the energy and like being in it, there was so much there about people not being able to understand each other, right? The colonist settlers come over, they don't understand the Native Americans. So you have that, right? They're trying to settle towns. There, if you really get into the history, they were fighting about how they wanted their churches set up. They couldn't agree on anything. There was a whole power struggle amongst the people even coming there that were all supposed to be there together, to build this town. So there's lots of stories about that and things that went awry. That's why by the time the witch thing happened, people were ready to point the finger at each other and take each other down. It was like even people within each other's families were second guessing each other and pointing the finger. So just extremely fascinating that a lot of the underlying tone of even going there was actually rooted like in this discussion, that we're having today. There's some similar elements. And because I know, like, I mean, one of my good friends always says God has jokes, right? So God does have jokes, but really nothing's ever a mistake. Like everything's supposed to happen. So really me sending that email, Tequila sending hers, it actually put me in a position to go on that trip where I had a totally different reframe myself before I ever
Mm.
got there around, oh my gosh, what would it feel like? Like, this is what it must have felt like to have somebody call you a witch and you're really not a witch. Like, that really went through my mind as we were like on some of the tours. I'm like, wow, how would that have felt? And like, these people are judging you and you're standing in the way they
Mm.
imprison people there. It was like iron shackles around your hands and your feet and chains to a wall and just really unsanitary conditions. So, um, that was meant to be. Like, I'm so happy I went on that trip from that perspective because some of it probably wouldn't have been as impactful or as meaningful to me had this not happened right before I went. So there's like always a blessing, even in the things that we feel are not a blessing, right? Right in the moment. And so I feel like for this, it's like come full circle because now we've had our conversation and
Yes.
that's beautiful,
Yes.
right?
It was perfect timing.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
was.
and so many people don't get those full circle moments. So, I feel like if we leave you with anything after sharing all this, it is how can you create more full circle moments in your life?
Mhm.
So, if there's
Yeah.
something you're up against right now that feels hard or the obstacle, how can you like dream into the future of how you turn that into a full circle moment? Knowing it may
Mhm.
not happen overnight, but what are those steps you take each day to bring yourself full circle so that you actually find, right, the blessing on the other side of what felt like a really messy obstacle,
No.
right?
Yes. Yes. And this
Yes,
was the perfect thing that bridged the gap. It
yes,
bridged the gap. Yeah.
I agree.
Oh.
And just thank you so much for being open and willing to have the conversation. I know these things aren't always easy, you know what I mean, for any of us in our very human state. So I just feel so grateful that you were willing to come on and share your story, give that a voice, because that's going to help so many other women. And then, like, just allow us to really be raw and real and what we were feeling and thinking in those moments, because those never get shared. I don't feel like, at least not in these types of spaces, for women to really embrace and digest.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate you for just creating this space for me to share my story. And the whole hopes is to bring awareness and hopefully it healed someone. Someone can relate to this. I know if one person relates to this, we've done our work. Yes.
Yes, I completely agree. Thanks for filling your ears with possibility today. You can find all the resources shared in today's episode in the show notes or description, depending on which platform you are tuning in from. Until next time, remember your understanding starts inside of you. So stay true to your woo.